Hey everyone, it's Teresa, and today I've got a really fun project to share with you, and I want to thank Cricut for sponsoring today's project. And I wanted to let you know I will be using my Cricut Maker 3. This thing is awesome. So it's a smart cutting machine that's going to allow you to make all kinds of personalized projects. You can use hundreds of different materials, and we're going to be using our software from them called Design Space. We're going to walk through all of that, and I'm going to be making a custom sign using some stuff from Cricut, making some stuff with some burn paste, and some resin. I'm so excited. I can't wait to share it with you. So first we are going to start off in Cricut Design Space, and I am going to use one of their shapes. We're going to start off with a square because, well, squarish rectangle. It'll be a rectangle. I'm going to put the measurements of this project, which is 17 by, I can't remember, 7.5, something like that. I'm actually going to be using a piece of plywood to make this, and I'm leaving it rounded on the edges just because I am going to kind of round it a little bit, my piece of wood. And I've got this really fun phrase, life is better at the beach, and we're going to customize it a little bit. It's cool because you can use Design Space to get all of these different little pieces out of, but I'm going to take away some pieces of it first. I'm going to take off all of these items here that you're seeing on the screen using the contour. I'm going to hide the contour basically. And in my opinion, it's the easiest to do if you have an iPad, but you can use it on any of your devices. So if you have a computer, if you have your phone, everything like that, you can kind of just zoom in and click on the actual little lines. And then what it'll do is it's hiding it, and it's not going to cut it on your machine. So it gives you the ability to use all of those fun phrases and different pictures and images and graphics and all kinds of things without having to make it all on your own. So I'm just going to size that down to fit into our rectangle. We're just going to leave it at the top though. And if you wanted to even break it up, you could do the same thing with that contour feature. Once I'm done, I'm going to hide my rectangle because I don't want to cut that. Although you can still cut that. Sometimes it makes it easier. I'm going to be doing this first part of it without a mat. I originally thought I was going to put some other little pieces on it, and then I kind of changed my mind. So ignore that little brown box at the bottom because we're not cutting anything additional. So I'm going to go in and browse the materials. Again, there's hundreds of different materials that our Cricut Maker 3 can cut on. I am going to be doing this one in the new Smart Stencil Vinyl. So this is a new thing I just got, I believe. Yeah, I tried it once before. So we're just going to load it into the machine without a mat, which is so awesome because it is so fast. You don't have to fool around with the mats. And first we're just going to feed it through the machine, clicking the button that blinks. It's going to measure out your materials, making sure you have enough. Once it has wheeled itself around, see it's wheeling it in, wheeling it out, it will then tell you it's ready, and it's going to blink with your little triangle. You push that, and then it's going to it's going to start cutting it. Sound effects are included today, everyone. It's just going to measure everything out. It's going to ask you if everything's loaded in there right. We're not putting it through with a heat transferring thing, so we don't need to mirror it. It's going to find your tool, and then it's going to start to cut. Eventually it's rolling, it's going. See, here we go. Magic of YouTube, and bam, it's done. It really wasn't done that fast, but we can pretend, right? So once it is done, it's going to tell you to unload your material. I like to cut the material off first using that little slidey tool, and then you hit the little arrows and watch, here it comes. It's going to spit it out at you. Boom, you got your stuff ready to go. I told you guys, sound effects are included today. All right, I've cut it down so that it'll fit, and I actually used my Cricut measuring mat. Please excuse my head. I'm trying to get this right because this is kind of a gift-ish. It's a custom sign. A friend of mine from work was like, oh yeah, my wife's really into beachy stuff. And I was like, well, I have a thing for you. I need to practice my resin stuff. So what I'm doing right now is I'm kind of measuring out like where everything is going to fit and go. So I'm measuring how, like, where I need to place everything along my measuring mat, where I need to cut and all that stuff. So see, I've placed little markers on the sides of where I need to cut, figured out kind of like where the middle is. You just kind of play with it and figure out what the best way for you is. So I'm just going to trim off my edges of my stencil vinyl, where I marked it, showing that that's where basically how wide my entire board is. Now I will go ahead and weed out all of the lettering, because remember, this is a stencil, so anywhere you see white is where you're going to paint it or apply. What I will be using is my torch paste. So this is obviously sped up considerably. I do take a little bit more time to do it. You don't want to go too fast because you don't want to pull pieces that you don't mean to, and it's just better just to go a little slower until you get the hang of it. And this one actually weeded out really nicely. I'm really very impressed with how it weeded out. Now I will be applying just a nice little piece of the transfer tape. This one is also the Cricut one, and because I did not feel like cutting multiple pieces, I'm using 2 separate little pieces to kind of just make it work so I didn't have to cut multiple pieces. You're then going to, of course, burnish it down, make sure this stuff is sticking. It does give me a little bit of problem coming off that backer, but that is all right. We get it, we make it work. And I'm going to place it down using my measuring mat to make sure that I am centered, or at least as centered as I can possibly get it. If you've been here for a little while, you know it's not exactly my strong suit, but that's all right. I think I got it pretty good. It was a gift, so it's not like if it wasn't absolutely perfect, they weren't going to say anything. I didn't, charge them any money for it. And next, I'll just peel off our transfer tape. And remember, there's 2 pieces, so just keep that in mind if you're doing it, if you're doing the same thing, because I never seem to cut the transfer tape to fit exactly it. I don't know. I just don't seem to do that. As you're doing it, make sure you're keeping it really low and going pretty slow. Again, this is pretty sped up. So I am going to add a little bit of the painter's tape, and I'm going to be using this torch paste. It is kind of like a reddish pink. Don't worry, it's not gonna be that color in a minute. I'll use a little bit of my backer sheet just because I don't want to waste things, why not? And I'm just gonna blot it on just like you would if you were painting. I'm using a sponge brush, straight up, straight down. And you're just going to try your best not to get any swiping motions, I think is probably the best way to say it, because you don't want to risk it getting underneath your stencil. I will then take off all of the stencil pieces. It does take a little bit of time because there's some small little detail in there, but it works like a charm. And with the torch paste, if you end up getting any little bits of it, like if you see any little bleeding or anything like that, you just can clean it up with a little bit of water, a little bit of sanding, you'll be fine. And I actually didn't have any, and that was really impressive because, like I said, this is a piece of plywood, and not even like a new piece of plywood, this is like an old piece of plywood, and it worked just fine. So I'll weed out all of those little areas. Again, this is super sped up, so take your time, try to let it be relaxing. Some people find it very relaxing to weed things. I don't know if I'd go that far, but it's nice when it comes through and you're like, it's perfect, and doesn't have bleed marks. It doesn't have any, sometimes you have a little bit of harder time with this, not harder wood, but more grainy wood. I definitely sanded it down pretty smooth because I knew this is what I was going to be doing with it. And what I like to do is brush off any of the excess little flakes because I did let this paste dry completely before I took it off. Now we will go through with our heat gun. It is set up to the highest heat. And again, this is super sped up. So just know that it will take a little bit of time. You want to kind of warm up the whole area first and then slowly work it through your whole writing, graphic design, whatever you have. And eventually it starts to blacken, and that is when it's actually working. It's actually burning the wood underneath it. Once you get to the point where you don't see any more of the pigmented torch paste, then you know you're good. And you can kind of even leave it to where it doesn't have a total burn to it. And because I'm a little bit of a pyromaniac, I'm going to take my blowtorch and I'm going to burn the wood around it. I'm going to give it just a little bit more depth of color, a little more detail. The person I'm making this for really likes that torched wood. I made a couple of coasters and stuff like that at one point, so he is going to like it. His wife's going to like it. Now we're going to jump into making some stuff with the resin. I will be doing more videos on resin in the future. This is kind of my first one showing you guys. I hope you guys like it because I kind of love it. I'm kind of obsessed. I'm just going to pour down some of a deeper color of resin, making sure it's all nice and level. You've got your silicone stuff underneath it, the whole thing. Make sure you're wearing all your safety, attire as well. Gloves, mask, you're in a ventilated area, the whole thing. I will leave the info for the resin and the colors and all that stuff down below in case you're curious about it. I'll do, like I said, a much more in-depth video on the resin in the future. I'm coating kind of the edges of the board. I like that look of it to be kind of completely pushed over the edge. And if you like that as well, make sure you're taping the bottom side of it. I kind of forgot on this one. I was too excited and I poured my resin ahead of time, but that's all right. And now I'm mixing a little bit lighter of a blue to give it it's really got a much more turquoisey look, but I'm kind of just going through adding the resin wherever I want it to swoop up, look a little bit more like the ocean. And it's just going to be super fun. I cannot wait for you to see the final result. So once you've gotten all the colors on, I'm going just kind of through and making sure it goes over the edges and giving a quick little run of the blowtorch. That is just going to pop any little bubbles that you may end up with. Now I'm going to run a thin line of just clear resin. No color has been added to it. It's just mixed up, the whole thing. I'm just going to run that across the whole outline of that top bit of blue. And then here in a moment, once I'm done with that, I'll run a little bit of it through kind of the middle-ish. Almost, I think it's fun to do it kind of like in between those two colors, or maybe you want it just over one part of it. Maybe you want it around a couple parts of it. See, I run a little bit through the whole thing just to give it a little lighter look of it, the whole, however you like. This is how I did it though. Now I am thickening up that clear. This is kind of a new process for me, so I'm still learning what works the best for me. This particular project turns out really cool. I really am happy with how it turned out. I'm going to run a little of it through the rest of the wave because I am going to put an extra little bit of the white to give kind of like that foam look to our waves. Now, as I'm in the way, sorry, this is a really hard thing to do at this angle, and it's kind of an odd angle, sorry. I am going to take my white. Now, this one has sat out for a little while. That's kind of the secret to it. You want your stuff to set a little bit. Like there's a certain amount of working time when it comes to resin. You want your white especially to have sat for a little while and really kind of become thicker. You want it a little more jelly. Now I'm going to just take my heat gun and I am going to blow out those waves. Now depending on how thick it is will depend on how high you need your temperature, not your temperature, your power. So I have it up pretty high because it is a little bit on the thicker side, and I just blow that out. And now I'm going to go through and add just a little bit more of the white because I wanted to give it a little bit more detail, a little bit more depth, a little more, I don't know, a little bit more thickness at the edge of the wave, like you would see if you saw it at the beach, right? That's the whole idea, is to make it look like you would see it at the beach. Now remember, it is going to kind of spread out a little bit as well, so I'm going to blow that one out just a little, not too much, just because you don't want to go crazy with it, otherwise all of your foam will kind of spread out throughout the whole wave. Once that is done, we're going to let that sit for a whole 24 hours. Oh, I forgot. I'm sorry. I do spritz it down with some rubbing alcohol. A higher percentage is better. And again, run the blowtorch over it. Now I'm going to add a little bit of hardware to the back of it so you can hang it because it's a sign. And I will take these little D-hooks. And at first I was fighting with this teeny tiny little screw. These little screws were not my friend. So I figure out where I want it, and I'm going to just go ahead and tape it down first so it doesn't wiggle and move. And I will drill a pilot hole first. So you can do it however you want. I think another, probably better way to do it would have been to tape it down, mark it, or just hold it and mark it, and then do a pilot hole, and then screw in the screws. Either way, however works for you. Personally, doing the hardware on the back of stuff, on the bottom, the top, wherever it is, it always seems to be my challenge. So this was no different. Typically, I will call my husband in and say, hey, do this for me, because it just always gives me a problem. So I do my pilot holes and I add my screws, and then once that is finished, I'll peel off that tape, and it'll be done. Oh, doesn't it look so cool? I'm so excited with how it looks. I hope you do too. I hope you love it, and I hope you want to see more, because you're going to see more if you check out my videos. So I hope you had a great time watching me create this sign, and hope you want to see some more. Don't forget to give me a big thumbs up and subscribe if you're new, and I will see you next time.